Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Amber and this is my April wrap up. So I read 14 books in April and I DNF'd 3. So I'm going to talk about all of them, but I'm going to very briefly go over my DNFs because I'm going to talk about them in a different video. So the first one that I DNF'd was Greenwich Park, which is being publicised or marketed as a thriller book, but I found it more of a sort of mystery crime sort of thing and I wasn't really into it. I gave up at about 25%. That is one that I received as a review copy. The other two books that I DNF'd were from my TBR pile. The first one was The Dinner by Herman Koch. This one I found very boring. Again, that's the main reason that I DNF books. It spent the first 40 pages just talking about the food at the restaurant that the characters were at, so I didn't find it very intriguing at all, so I gave up at about 40 pages in. I also gave up on The 100-Year-Old Man Who Climbed Out of the Window and Disappeared. This I was reading for Linguathon as well, same as The Dinner. I got about 100 pages in and then I just wasn't really feeling it and I didn't really think that I would love the book, so I ended up DNFing it. I don't think it's a bad book by any means, it just wasn't really my kind of thing. I found that the present day storyline was a lot more interesting than the flashbacks and there were quite a few flashbacks, so I wasn't really loving the book, so I DNF'd it. So now on to the books that I actually read. Like I said, there were 14 of them. I didn't actually read anything for the last week of the month because I was really busy. We had a gas leak in our house and work was kind of manic, so I didn't really get much done. But I still managed to read 14 books, so I'm very, very pleased with that. The first one that I want to mention is one that I received for review and I want to mention it first in case any of you click off this video and I want to promote this book. So I read Where the Rhythm Takes You, which is a YA contemporary book set in Tobago. The main character has been looking after the family hotel since her mother died, with the help of her father of course, and she takes it very, very seriously, but she feels like she's kind of trapped in Tobago because all of her friends are going off and doing other things. They're leaving the country and studying in Europe or going to start a career in the US, and she feels like she has to stay at this hotel because that's what her mother wanted. One day her ex-best friend and ex-boyfriend comes back from the US having started a band over there. It's very successful, so he's kind of like a minor celebrity. She has to kind of confront him and deal with her feelings. I really, really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. It was very heartfelt. I felt a strong connection to the main character. I loved exploring Tobago as well. I'm not sure if I'll ever get the chance to go there, so it was really fun to explore it in the book. And at the end of the book as well, the author has included a playlist of relevant songs from Tobago. So I would highly recommend picking this one up if you're into YA contemporary. It's a very solid one. Should we try to get a pile going here? Let's do that. So the next 2 that I read were by the same author, Matt Haig. So the first one is The Midnight Library. I read this as part of my work book club. I enjoyed it. I gave it, I think, 3.5 stars at the time, probably more of a 3 now. So this is about a woman who tries to commit suicide because she feels like her life isn't really going anywhere. She's not got anything going for her. However, she is then transported to the Midnight Library. She can pull out books and go and visit several different lives where she could have taken a different path, and she sees where those paths could have taken her, and she begins to realize that maybe there is no perfect life and it's kind of what you make of it. I did enjoy it. I thought that it was a little bit short. It could have been bulked out a little bit more. I really thought that it was a good book club discussion piece though, and I really enjoyed talking about it with my book club. I thought that the main character was a little bit silly at times in that she went to all of these different lives. She went to multiple of them, and even by the last one she was still kind of not very good at lying because she had to pretend that she was part of this life and had been there all along and sort of take the place of her sort of other self, and she just wasn't very good at it still. And so I thought the character progression there was a little bit silly to me. It wasn't very realistic. I feel like if I had been visiting different lives and had to lie about my identity as myself, I would have done a better job, so that got on my nerves a bit. But I did like the overall message. I feel like with Matt Haig's books, you can tell that he loves himself and he thinks a lot of his own writing, which is good. I'm glad he's confident, but it comes across in his books. And then I also read How to Stop Time. I read this one as part of the 24-hour readathon, which happened in the last weekend of April, and I read it in just a couple of hours. It was a very, very quick read. I think I gave it 4 stars, maybe 3.5. This is about a man who was born in the 1500s, I think, in France, and he ages 1 year for every 15. So by the time he gets to 40, all of his friends and family are dead. Again, this one was a very good concept, but I didn't love the execution. Again, I feel like Matt Haig loves his own writing. I feel like it just could have been better, but like I said, I did really enjoy it. I gave it so many stars just because it was a very quick read and it was very interesting as well. I did find it a bit silly that the main character just happened to know Shakespeare and various other famous people. Like, I realized that he was quite old and had a chance to meet a load of people, but it's a bit of a coincidence, you know, that he knew everyone. So I really liked this one as well. Next, I read Metamorphosis. I read this one as as part of the Linguathon as well, and I don't really know how to rate it. I'm probably going to give it 4 stars. I thought it was a very interesting story, although it was a bit weird. It's about a man who turns into a bug. I just really liked not necessarily the message behind it, because I don't really know what the message is, but I liked kind of thinking about it. I like the experience of reading it, and it was quite interesting to me. It's a very short book. I think it was like 60 pages, if that. Yeah, 54 pages, and it was very easy to read for a classic, so I appreciated that. It's not something I would ever reread, but I'm glad that I finally got around to it, because I've heard a lot about this one and how strange it is. I understand why people hate it, but I mean, it's only 54 pages long, so I don't think I can really hate a book that much if it hasn't done anything wrong. Next, I read a couple of audiobooks. The first one was Invisible Women, which is non-fiction, and it talks about data biases against women, particularly women living in poverty or working class women or women of colour. I thought this one was very well narrated. I think it's narrated by the original author. It just brought up things that I hadn't really thought about before. For example, how drugs and vaccines, which is relevant now, are tested on men primarily. Then they're put through as safe, but then you find out later that they haven't really been tested on enough women, or the same amount of women as men, and they have different side effects. It also talks about the pill and blood clots and things, and how that somehow hasn't changed since the 70s, I think they said, even though it does cause blood clots in women. It also spoke about, for example, how commuter towns are made for men who commute rather than the women who would be typically staying at home and looking after the family or family members. So it was just things like that that I hadn't really considered before, and I really enjoyed it, so I gave it 4 stars. The other audiobook I listened to was Hood Feminism, and this one talks about feminism, but not just for white people, so mainly focuses on black women, but it also talks a little bit about other people of colour as well. Found this one really interesting as well. I gave it 4 stars. Again, it talks about a lot of things that I hadn't really thought of before. The next book I read was actually a reread, because I wanted to recap it for Recaptains, and I went to get it from my granddad's house, and that is Between the Lines. This is a new adult book. It's one of the first new adult books that came out when the publishers were trying to market that as a new age range. This is about a main character who is an actress, and she gets her kind of big break as the star of a film which I think is a Pride and Prejudice retelling. She meets the kind of like Hollywood it boy who's called Reed, and it follows both of their perspectives. Reed is an established actor. He's very arrogant, and he kind of knows his way around the Hollywood scene, I guess. And the main character is from a smaller city, like I said, is just having her big break, and she is kind of thrown into this Hollywood world. They start recording their film together, and there's a lot of behind the scenes drama. I liked this one, but it hasn't aged well. Like, Reed is a complete arse, and I don't know how anyone can enjoy reading from his perspective. I do remember him growing on me as the series went on, because I think the 4th book maybe focuses on him, but he made some awful comments about women in this book. I wouldn't recommend reading this nowadays. I don't think people would enjoy it as much, but I do like stories about rich celebrities, particularly actors, so if you really want to, you could check this out if that's something that you enjoy, but there are definitely better books out there that cover the same topic. I'm probably going to finish rereading the series just because I do want to recap them, but it's definitely not the best book, and I originally gave it 4 stars when I first read it, but upon the reread I'll probably give it 2.5 to 3. Then I read an advanced reader's copy. This one was The End of Men. This is a post-apocalyptic book, or apocalyptic book, in which a pandemic originating in Scotland kind of decimates society because it starts killing off men, which is obviously 50% of the population. Some men are immune, so they're not completely wiped out, but it kind of talks about how women are starting to come to power because a lot of the men are killed. I found it quite interesting. I do think that it could have been a bit more action-packed, I think. I can't remember if I gave it 3 stars or 3.5, but I think it's kind of in that sort of star range. I think it could have been a little bit more exciting, and to be honest, I read it so long ago that I can't remember what my actual feelings about it were, but they weren't very strong. I also read The Bride Test, which is the sequel to the Kiss Quotient. I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed the autism rep. I know that some people have complained about the fact that the main female character is brought over from Vietnam in order to basically be paid to marry the male main character. That's valid. I think it's not a great start to a relationship, but I still really enjoyed the book. And again, the autism rep in this was fantastic. Really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to read The Heart Principle when it comes out, I think in May. I read another old school book, and that is Ruby Red. So this came out in 2010, I think. It's been translated from German, and I remember when it first came out here in the UK, everyone was dying to read it, and it was so hyped when I first started booktubing. I bought it, I think, for secondhand off Amazon because everyone was talking about it, and I didn't really like it. I think I would probably give this 2.5 stars. I might have liked it a bit more when I was younger, when I wasn't so well versed in YA, but I feel like YA nowadays is much more complicated than this. So this is about a time traveler. It's just started raining, so I apologize, I can't move now. I'm committed to this spot. Yeah, so this is about a time traveler. The main character realizes that she knows rather, that she comes from a line of time travelers, and there's this whole complex like prophecy surrounding it, and she doesn't think that she is a time traveler. She thinks that her cousin is the one in this generation with that gene. However, it turns out that it's her, and it spends like probably 3/4 of the book trying to convince her that she is the time traveler, trying to convince other people of that. At this point, she has gone back in time several times, so the reader knows that she is the time traveler in the family. And then in the last quarter of the book, it starts to pick up action-wise, but I feel like in this book, first of all, the action isn't great, and it really feels like the author was dragging out the introduction so that she could turn this into a trilogy. And also the main character had no personality. I know that a lot of people will defend YA characters or teenagers for having no personality in YA books. This one, I'm not even joking, she did not stand up for herself at all, which isn't a bad thing necessarily, but she also had like no opinions. She had no hobbies that I knew of. She often referred to or deferred to her best friend rather than making the decisions herself, and her best friend would come out with a lot of the opinions and actions that the main character should have been doing and would have been doing if this was written nowadays. So I don't think this book's aged well. This is very much kind of classic YA, and I wouldn't recommend reading it. I don't know why it has so many 5-star reviews, but I think it's probably because people hadn't read as many YA books, and YA was still a very, very new genre, so it hadn't been developed as much as it has nowadays, let's say. I also read The Initial Insult by Mindy Mcginnis. This one is a retelling of Edgar Allan Poe's something or other, and I gave it 2 stars. I didn't enjoy this at all. This is not Mindy Mcginnis's best work, so I don't even really know what it was about, to be honest. It was so boring. So it's about a teenager, 2 teenage girls who used to be best friends, and one of them wronged the other, and then the one who was wronged, or feels like she was wronged, kidnaps the other one and ties her up, and then they start arguing over stuff. That was pretty much the entire book. I didn't really like it, and it got a bit weird towards the end, which is fine. I can deal with weird sometimes, but I wasn't invested in the characters, so I didn't like it when it did happen. So I gave this one 2 stars, didn't really enjoy it. I don't really have much to say about it. It was not Mindy Mcginnis's best work. I then read The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. This is his second book. He wrote The Silent Patient. I read this as part of the 24-hour readathon as well, and I sped through it. I read it in just a few hours. It was an okay book. I think I would probably give it 3.5 to 4 stars. It was thrilling, it was exciting. It's more dark academia than his previous book was. So this is set in Cambridge University. The main character goes to check on her niece who goes to the university because someone has been killed at her uni, and so the main character sort of gets involved in the investigation, and more girls start to be killed. I found that this managed to hit almost every single dark academia trope that it could, but I still really enjoyed it, and there were also a couple of Easter eggs in there for readers of The Silent Patient, which I really enjoyed. I kind of want to flick through The Silent Patient now to kind of reintroduce myself to certain parts of it and the characters in that. But I very much enjoyed reading this one, so I gave it 3.5 to 4 stars. I then read a book for my true crime project that I'm doing. So this is the one that I'm going to be reading and reviewing for May, or in May, and that is Pretty Little Killers. This is a true crime book. It's about the murder of Skylar Neese, which I will talk about more in my true crime video. This book was okay. It was very informative and very thorough. However, the writer, I think, is an older woman, and she assumes that her readers are also older, so oftentimes she would explain what the text speak meant or what the Twitter slang meant, and obviously I already knew that. Like, I'm not that old, and I wish I had highlighted some of it because I was reading it out to Quill and it was quite funny. I'm trying to find an example really quickly. I don't think I'm going to be able to. Things like several exclamation marks mean that the person who wrote it was very excited or very annoyed, and it's like, yeah, we know. I think at one point she explained what the love heart meant. Yeah, it wasn't the most well-written book, but it was very informative and it really helped my research. The rain is getting heavier, so I'm going to go through the last 2 books really quickly. The first one is An Emotion of Great Delight by Tahereh Mafi. This one is a YA contemporary book by her, and it's set in 2003, and it's about a Muslim main character's experiences after 9/11 growing up in the US. It was very dark, it was very emotional, and I didn't love it. I'm gonna give it 3 stars, but yeah, it was a good book, and I guess I would recommend it. It's just I preferred her other YA contemporary. I thought that was a lot stronger, and I felt a lot more connected to the main character than I did in this one. And I think I also partly wasn't in the mood for something quite so depressing, and this one was quite depressing. Are you gonna say hello? And the final book that I read in April, I think that's all of them anyway, was The Prison Healer, which is a YA fantasy book, and I really enjoyed this one. This one actually shocked me by how much I enjoyed it. So I gave this one 4 stars. It's about a young girl who was imprisoned along with her father when she was younger, and she has worked her way up to becoming the prison healer or the prison doctor. And then one day the rebel queen is brought into the prison. She is kind of comatose, she's not in a good state, and the main character receives a note saying, "Keep the queen alive, we're coming." The main character's family are also supposed to be coming for her. They're meant to be coming for her for quite a while now, so she's holding out for them. The rebel queen is supposed to go through some trials, but like I said, she's comatose. The main character offers to act as her champion, and so she has to go through the elemental trials in order to save the queen. I really enjoyed this one. There were quite a few twists in there that I really liked, and the ending was very exciting. And I think actually the second book is coming out in just a few months, so this isn't like a case where there's a whole year or more between releases. This is coming out really quickly, and I think the second book is on NetGalley, and I'm so tempted to get to it because the ending of this one was fantastic. Really enjoyed this one, and I can't wait to read more from this author. So really quickly going into the stats while the rain holds off, I read, like I said, 14 books in April, and I DNF'd 3. 4 of the books that I read were young adults, 1 was new adult, and 9 were adult. 3 of the authors were new to me. 1 was a debut, sorry, 2 were a debut, and 1 was a reread. I read 1 2-star book, 6 3-star books, and 7 4-star books. So it was a good reading month overall. There were a few more 3 stars than I would have wanted, but it was okay. And as for the genres, I read 4 books that I would say were kind of speculative, 3 non-fiction, 3 contemporary, 2 thrillers, 1 romance, 1 fantasy, and 1 apocalyptic book. I think it was a really good reading month. I also hauled a lot of books, so I have a book haul coming up soon because I went a bit over the top and now I have piles of books on my floor that I need to haul. I hope that May is just as good. I hope that I read a few more 5-star reads. I've got some really good books lined up for May, which you have probably seen in my May TBR. If you haven't, I will link it up above so you can go and check it out. Bucky also agrees that my May TBR is looking fantastic. What do you think of my reading? She's very impressed. So thank you for watching this wrap up. Let me know how many books you read in April, what ones were your favorites. If you have read any of these books, let me know what your thoughts were in the comments below. I really don't mind if you disagree with me on any of them. It'll be good to have a book discussion in the comments. Thank you again for watching, and I'll be back soon with another video. Bye.